Hi everyone, it's Alyssa Clark, the Graduate Student Program Director at the Green Center. Today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about a CV versus a resume and when you should use both, and then go into some more tips on how to write a professional resume. Let's get started. First, I'd like to discuss the differences between an employer's perspective for both an academic and a non-academic job posting. For academic postings, employers are going to look at your PhD granting institution. They're going to want to see evidence of success and prestige, as well as evidence of scholarly publications, presentations, and teaching experience. When you're looking at non-academic positions, employers are going to be focused on skills and experience, those transferable success skills that you have, your ability to learn in the position, and what your value is that you can add to that position. You need to have some sort of immediate value to them to be able to be somebody who's considered for the position. This quote from the Perspectives on History from the AHA is really helpful, I think, in kind of summing up how we should think about resumes and our career experience as PhD students. It says, "We tend to focus too narrowly on what we know, rather than what we did to gain that knowledge. As a result, many graduate students disqualify themselves from jobs outside the academy. Your time in grad school is work, and you must learn to articulate those skills you are gaining in these years." And I think that's really going to be true as you see how we outline a resume and how you need to be selling your skill sets that you have. So first, I'd look to look broadly at the university's competencies. The college competencies were developed to better map and coordinate knowledge that students gain through their University of Rochester co-curricular experience, and really think about how you learn these different skills embedded in the curriculum that you have and then in your experiences outside of the classroom. These are skill sets that employers are really going to look for because they need these type of skill sets on their team. So when we think about our resume later on in this presentation, it's going to be important to relate back to these competencies and think about your skill sets and how you reach them. One of the Green Center's goals is to help you really recognize, develop, and translate these skills. So feel free to reach out and make an appointment with a career advisor. We'd love to talk to you about how you're meeting the competencies. At the end of this presentation, I have an activity that might help you start to flesh out some examples that meet these competencies. So now let's think about the differences between a CV and a resume, because I think a lot of PhD students understand the CV document, but then we need to also look at how the resume differs and how we're going to look at restructuring and rewriting our content to fit for a resume rather than a CV. So first off, the audience. The audience for a CV is going to be individuals in academia. If you're writing a document for someone who's not in academia, you're going to be writing a resume. And that's the non-academic employer, networking contacts, mentors, etc. You're going to need to have a resume rather than a CV. The purpose of the document. For a CV, it's going to be obtaining an academic position, travel grants, etc. Anything, again, within academia. But for a resume, it's going to be to obtain a non-academic job. The purpose of the document is going to drive which document you write and tailor. So the structure is very different for a CV versus a resume. For a CV, it's going to be a really text-rich narrative where you're really describing things and letting people know exactly what you did in that specific thing, that you published, in that specific event that you spoke at. Where a resume is much different and it uses a minimal text supported by your achievement-oriented bullets, using action verbs that correspond with the skill sets that are needed to really get your point across. It's not going to be text-rich. It's really going to be something that can grab people quickly and keep them in a short amount of time because the resume isn't looked at for very long. The content you're going to have, a CV is really your complete academic history, the research that you've done, teaching, awards, publications, service. It's going to be tailored to fit the institution or the department that you're applying for. Where a resume is going to be a snapshot of the relevant skills and experiences you have, and it's going to be tailored to fit a specific job or industry. It's not going to be a running list of document with everything that you've ever done. It's going to be short and it's going to be tailored. The length of a CV, kind of to follow the content that we just talked about, the length of a CV can be quite a bit longer, where it can be 3 to 4 pages for a doctoral candidate or more. I'm sure if you've seen some of your advisors' CVs, they're much longer. And when you're thinking of a resume, it's going to be 1 or 2 pages maximum. And when you start to think about how you write your resume, you can sit down with a career advisor in the Green Center and really talk about what that should look like and how to tailor and write your resume. Some unnecessary information. For your CV, things outside of academic pursuits, they probably don't want to know about, right? Because you're applying for something within academia. On your resume, you really need to think about things that are relevant for the role and function or industry that you're applying for, and things that don't fit that, you're not going to need. So you're not going to need a personal statement, or you're not going to be attaching references, for instance. So I really want you to think about your audience, and this is from moving forward in this presentation, we're going to just be talking about resumes and no longer be talking about CVs. So when you're thinking about your audience, you're going to be thinking about how you can tailor your resume for the specific population. So as your audience shifts, so does your story, and so does your storytelling. You're going to have different resumes and for every different audience and different opportunity that you apply for. You're going to tailor your resume, you're going to tailor your cover letter for each application. And just like the audience can shift, the purpose of your resume can shift, and so is your story. So if you're interviewing, the purpose is to sell yourself and to get that offer from the employer. But if you're sending a resume to a networking contact, the purpose is to share your background and get them excited and get them to want to talk to you. And those two things can look very different. So you're really going to have to think about first your audience and then your purpose. So for an example, one thing that I do is I kind of have a running document that keeps all of my different experiences where I update it and it's a living document and I add to it often. But when I go to send my resume for a position, or when I go to send my resume to a networking contact, I start a brand new document and then pull different things and tailor those specific things in that new resume for my audience and for my purpose. To start thinking about the structure and content, some common resume sections are going to be skills, education, experience, if you have community engagement or leadership. But again, you're going to want to think of the things that are going to be helpful for your audience. And some things aren't going to make your resume because they're not going to be for that specific audience. To tell a good story, you're going to want to organize your content. You're going to want to emphasize and prioritize the good stuff first. So think about the components of your story that tie and relate together. And in written pieces like your resume and your cover letter, the flow is going to be important. So thinking about your topic and then filling in those action verbs to keep the flow of your document moving. You can also consider adding some certain qualification summary for specific positions or industries, courseworks and projects that may be applicable, research, and awards and recognitions. You may have a short list of key publications and presentations, but only if it specifically speaks to that story. That's something more that's highlighted in a CV, but it can be useful to have in a resume. So more about formatting is you're really going to want to make sure that things are neat and that your format is consistent. That consistency throughout both your resume, your cover letter, and any other application materials is what's going to tie your story together and make sure that you as a candidate have a very clear story and purpose for applying for a position or sending to a mentor, etc. So your format needs to be easy to read and consistent. Your names and headings should stand out. You want to avoid templates. You can really make things more personal and make things fit better when you're not using a template. You want to use bold, italics, and capital letters to set it apart, and use classic fonts, avoiding graphics and colors. You're going to want to use bullet points to describe duties and projects, keeping them short and succinct and not write in paragraphs. You can have 1 to 2 full pages, and you're going to want your margins to be within 1/2 inch and 1 inch. Again, don't use a font that's less than 10-point font. 11 or 12 is usually preferred. If you get any smaller than 10-point font, it gets really hard to read. And as a reader of a resume, that's going to turn somebody off to reading your resume in the first place, which really doesn't help you advance in a search. And you're going to want to use your white space effectively, which makes it more visually appealing between sections. The last thing about formatting is that you're going to want to use a skills-based resume. So using a job posting to decide what skills to highlight, again, to really make it a unique resume for what you're using it for. Your physical address isn't necessary. Instead, make sure to link to your email. Your LinkedIn profile is also great, and your phone number that you can be reached at. If you do have a professional summary at the top, you really shouldn't be taking up a large chunk of space. Again, remember that you're not writing in paragraphs, so really try to keep it to 3 lines or less. And utilize action verbs to describe your experience, making sure that you pay attention to the tense of your verb. So if you worked in the past, that you make it in the past tense, etc. So really thinking about that format and really proofreading, because mistakes can also be a turnoff for employers. So I want you to start to think about identifying these transferable success skills that you have. And make a list of what you do. So as a PhD student, what do you do? And you can think about this on a daily or weekly or semesterly basis. What are your tasks and what are your duties? And then think about these things in this self-reflective activity and examine them with a lens focused on the college competencies. So really thinking about something. So if you're a TA or if you teach a specific course, thinking about the different skill sets that you have from that task or duty and what is required of it. And then what abilities do you need or do you have that make you good at that skill? You may be relating to the critical thinking and problem solving component of the college competencies and thinking about how you've completed a course maybe in research methods or in pedagogy or in statistical analysis that you're using within your class or within your TA role. Maybe you've designed surveys for evaluation of coursework or designed tests and really thinking about the skill sets that you have that make you good at that skill. You can kind of start to write out these things that you're good at and these tasks that you completed. And this can help you build out things that you might write in your resume when they're applicable. These are all great things to kind of have a running list when you have this big base document that you might start to pull from for your resume. So some next steps. After you've done this reflective activity and you've reviewed this PowerPoint, you're really going to start to think about defining your audience and your purpose. You can define your story for each. They can be different. They can be different stories for every position that you apply for. You're going to want to draft and practice your resume writing. So make sure you visit the Green Center. Any of our career advisors are happy to help look over your resume and talk to you about specific positions that you're tailoring your resume for. We'd love to talk to you more. So with that, make sure that you stay connected. Our general email is here, and you can also find and make appointments on Handshake.